your dog's food label finally told you the truth, down to carbs, calories, and clear measurements, just like ours. Welcome to The Dog Who Asked for More, the podcast helping dog parents who feel stuck and overwhelmed by their pup finally let go of the guilt, learn to communicate clearly, and build the bond you've always dreamed of through a partnership-based approach that combines training, nutrition, and enrichment instead of chasing the quick fixes that don't actually work. I'm Em, and in this episode, you'll learn why current dog food labels are so confusing and how brands have gotten away with hiding carbs, how the new pet nutrition facts box changes everything, giving you human-style clarity on what's really inside your dog food bag, and what it means for your dog's health and your wallet, so you can finally make good decisions with confidence. Because once you know how to read a label, you'll never look at a bag of dog food the same way again. Daniel Shuloff is a pet nutrition expert and a familiar voice on the show, and he's here to walk us through the monumental shift happening right now in pet food labeling. The Association of American Feed Control Officials, better known as AFCO, has unveiled a brand new pet nutrition facts box for the first time in more than 40 years. Let's start here. Why did the guaranteed analysis system last so long, and what issues has it caused for pet guardians?
Consumers, the advocacy groups that purport to represent them, folks within the companion animal public health community have all been pushing for changes similar to what we are now seeing take place for something on the order of 15 to 20 years. The US FDA, the national government agency that governs both at a federal level, the labeling of human foods and pet foods, established the Nutrition Facts Panel. I'm holding up, for anybody listening on audio, my can of Coke Zero. What you can see right here is the FDA's Nutrition Facts Panel. And that's been in place for decades. Anybody that consumes human packaged foods has become pretty familiar with what it shows. And though you'll get folks who will quibble with the layout and the content there, it's minimal. Most folks see it as a good, comprehensive summary of what's inside this product nutritionally. Ever since that's been in place, once upon a time, companion animals, dogs and cats, were generally thought of like closer to livestock animals than they currently are. Right now, if you've spent any time looking at the pet food industry as an industry, you've heard somebody trying to sound smart talking about the humanization of pets. We're constantly told this is a big trend in the industry and that it's what we all need to be thinking about. And it really is just a fancy way of saying people love their dogs like they're parts of their family. They don't think of them as animals that get the special privilege of sharing their home. For me, I don't have kids. These are my kids, basically. It's the same emotional hardwiring that would make me like stoked on my kids and loving of kids is that. And the vast majority of pet owners in the Western world feel the same. And so it makes sense that we'd be interested in understanding the food we're feeding them in a similar way to the way we get to understand it when it comes to the food that we're eating for ourselves. And so for, a period of nearly 2 decades, folks have been pushing back on the old guaranteed analysis panel. And the reason they've been doing that is because it doesn't give you that level of basic understanding that the FDA's Nutrition Facts Panel does. If you're listening to the show right now, think back to the very first time you walked into a pet store to buy food for your very first dog or cat. Take yourself back in time to that lovely moment. And just think about the first time you were thinking about, what do I feed this dog? And you looked at the nutrition, you looked at the back of the bag. You may have been expecting the exact same thing as you see on a can of Coke. And you then discovered that it doesn't look like that. It's got expressions on a percentage basis. What percentage of the product is water versus what percentage is ash? What percentage is protein? And it's got minimums and maximums. It doesn't have a number. It doesn't just say, this is how many grams of this stuff is in the food. It says we know it's at least this much, or it's no more than this much. And it's got jargon and terminology and stuff like that on there too. You needed somebody to explain it to you, I would wager. Once upon a time, it was like, oh, okay, what does this mean? Let me go talk to the owner of the pet store. Because it's not intuitive. It's long been a source, because of that gap between what the Guaranteed Analysis Panel requires, and what the, modern scientific study and testing can reveal is huge. That gap is big. And so folks have wanted more. for a long time. You also asked about why it's taken so long. And on this, I can only speculate because the organization that sets the rules, AFCO, operates by committee. And so they have discrete little sub parts of their organization that play various roles in creating and setting and publicizing and making official their nutritional labeling rules. And I'm not privy to all those committee discussions, but I can tell you, based on my observations, what I see, what I suspect is happening, which is that they're dragging their feet intentionally because it's bad for industry to implement these new rules. In my eyes, the most important problem with the guaranteed analysis panel, as you see it right now, maybe you're sitting at home, you've got your bag of dog food, and you flip that thing over and you're looking at it right now. One of the things that springs out at me first when I look at it, there is no line item for carbohydrate content. Okay. Carbohydrate content, as you would expect, is a part of every one of the FDA's nutrition facts panel. They'll let you use a few different versions of the chart, the FDA, depending on how big your product is. But they all have carbohydrate content on there. That's something that we as consumers think about. That's relevant to our decision making regarding whether we think of something as healthy or unhealthy. And we should. I wrote a whole book that's about this one subject. 2016, I published this book that's just basically like carbohydrate is the devil for dogs and cats. As a matter of nutritional science, it does things to their bodies, their metabolism that other nutrients don't do. So every consumer, and you don't have to have read my book to think of carbs as relevant to your decision making regarding your dog. The guaranteed analysis panel not only doesn't require brands to disclose the carbohydrate content, it prohibits them from disclosing the total carbohydrate content. So you look at this bag of dog food and you go, well, whatever it does say on here, I know nothing about the carbohydrate content. That alone is a colossal problem, but it's really, really good for industry. And so when I say to you that I suspect that what's going on here is AFCO has been dragging its feet because it's good for industry, this is because, in essence, carbohydrate is the backbone of the US pet food ecosystem. It's the nutrient that is most widespread by far in the industry. If you took all the dog food in the country, put it all into one big ball, and then broke that ball up by nutrient class, protein, fat, carbohydrate. Carbohydrate makes up the biggest part of that by far. It is the backbone. It's the main part of the system. And brands know that people generally, no matter how scientifically literate they are, they know that people don't love carbs these days. And so they don't want to tell consumers that their products are 50, 60% carbohydrate. In fact, they want to suggest the opposite. And having a labeling regime that doesn't require that makes it really easy. And so in essence, for decades now, AFCO's been dragging its feet on this, and it's still dragging them for reasons I'm sure we'll get to it later in the show.
One of the biggest light bulb moments for me when I went through my CPCN was learning that most brands of dog foods are 40 to 60 up to 70% carbohydrates, and dogs have zero requirements for carbohydrates, and yet 40 to 60% of every single meal is something that they have zero requirements for. That was mind blowing to me. And like you said, they don't disclose that on the label. You have to know how to do the math in order to figure out what percentage of carbohydrates are in your dog's food. And there is a formula for it. And I couldn't tell you what the formula is right now, but it's in my CPCN handbook and they tell you exactly how to do it. And let me tell you, I've gone through all of the big ones and looked, and I haven't found one that is less than 30% out of all of the big household brands that everyone could probably name.
It's the case with fresh and raw brands as well now. It's like the farmer's dog is 30% carbohydrate. Like everybody, there's a reason that it's so pervasive. And if you don't have to think too hard about it for too long to figure out what it is. Carbohydrate on a dollar for dollar basis, carbohydrate is the cheap nutrient. You can raise a field of corn and then harvest it and then dry it out and stick it in a silo for a very long period of time in a way that you cannot if you're trying to cultivate a calorie of meat-based protein, like a lamb or a chicken. It doesn't work that way. You have to raise the animal, you have to feed the animal, you have to slaughter the animal. And then once you have the raw materials, it's not shelf stable. Don't think about this. A silo of carcass animal is not good. So roughly speaking, just like estimate, A calorie of carbohydrate costs a pet food company as an ingredient about 1/10 what a calorie of meat-based protein costs. So if you're running the books at Purina or wherever, you have a huge incentive, if you can get away with it, to use as much carbohydrate as you can in the product. And that's a big part of the logic in how these guys formulate their products, which would all be fine. Shelf stability is a good thing, all else being equal. Shelf stability, great. Okay, that's easier. We don't have to eat it in 4 days or it's going to spoil. There's plenty that's great about that kind of thing. It's just that, unfortunately, carbohydrates, not only are they like not required for any aspect of canine nutrition, they actively do bad things to dogs. And that's why it's a problem. We got a tough environment when it comes to that. Tough place to be a consumer right now. It's going to get better with the new rules. But the one thing, if you're listening to this show and you feel a sense of confusion and just being lost when you go try to make a good decision for your dog, know that you're not alone, and that's understating it. That is the default state that even well-educated, well-intentioned, thoughtful, hardworking pet food consumers are occupying, because it's just a horrible information environment. And it's perfectly natural to feel confused and not know what you're doing.
It is so normal to feel confused. And also learning that veterinarians, unless they specialize in nutrition, only have to take 1 to 3 hours of education in nutrition to become a veterinarian was a little bit disheartening for me. So if
Of
you have
course.
a veterinarian that says, eat this prescription diet, eat this diet from PetSmart, eat whatever. And they're showing you all of these brands that, are probably the brands that we're mostly concerned about here. I would love for you to ask your veterinarian how many hours of education they have in nutrition, and then maybe think about hiring somebody to help you figure out a better diet for your dog. Because if they're just recommending what the industry is telling them to recommend, because we've talked about this before, Science Diet is on the back of the veterinarian's education book for their
Yes, that's
nutrition
right.
courses.
Yeah.
Like that, they are paying for that part of their education to be featured and be a brand that is recommended by veterinarians. So I want you to sit with that for just a second, because I think it's so important to remember that this is an industry and that industries are here to make money, and that it's not always about what's healthy for our pets. So that's why this label change is so huge.
Yeah. When I wrote my book, veterinarians play a unique role that you got to talk about when you talk about companion animal nutrition and companion animal public health and the state of pet food consumer awareness. And if we're feeling confused, it's clearly an important role. Most people, studies show, look to their veterinarian, trust their veterinarian's perspective on nutritional matters. My perspective when I wrote the book was mostly as you just articulated it, that the reason, the kind of primary thing why you get bad information coming out of vets, because I wholeheartedly endorse that statement, that like nutritional information coming out of vets is systematically wrong in predictable ways and is often very wrong, was more or less the same as you. It's like the education, such as it is at vet schools, is poor in that it's just, there's not enough of it. I wrote all about it in my book. My friend went to one of the best veterinary schools in the country. She went to NC State University, and she gave me the text that they were required to use in their veterinary nutrition elective. And it's like a 30-page pamphlet that covers not dog nutrition, okay? It's like all species, all nutritional topics that you're possibly going to come up in 30 pages. It literally has like a hand-drawn sheep on the front of it. And by comparison, my book about one subject, obesity, in one species, dogs, 400 pages long. It's just not a great deal of information, and that's clearly not good enough. As I speak these words in whatever it is, August of 2025, I have really come to believe that an even bigger problem is that vets are really raised up and trained in a environment that has systemic misinformation, that they are actively taught stuff that is not true. And that colors their perspectives on what reality is, what nutritional science actually shows, and that trickles down into people. And you've flagged some of the like reasons why and some of the ways that that comes out, but it's a deep topic. If you are a giant multinational corporation that's engaged in some systemic misinformation, that you're trying to mislead people about some scientific stuff, it's a great time to be alive. 2025 is a nice time for that. And the reason for that is that there are wackos all over the internet that see a conspiracy behind everything, every possible corner. And so when someone listens to this and a guy like me says, there's this huge conspiracy thing going on in the veterinary nutrition world where big, huge influential corporations are actively trying to mislead vets, it's tough to distinguish that from the guy that's like, oh yeah, birds aren't real or whatever. Like you have to get into the weeds to evaluate whether I'm that guy or whether I'm somebody that's done something that's really unearthed a real thing here. And it's like, man, the amount of show it takes to cover just helping people see that difference. We filed this big lawsuit over this. It's what the evidence actually shows and how the investigative stuff works is it's a process, man. We're inherently at a disadvantage trying to prove that up. But to the extent that anybody thinks that they're inclined to trust me, my hand before God, there is a significant, and for me, it's the problem of companion animal nutrition these days is the broad misinformation campaign that veterinarians are subjected to by virtue of just trying to practice in good faith in the US. It's a disaster.
It is a disaster. And unfortunately, it takes a lot of people like you and a lot of people like me pushing that misinformation out there and making the facts readily available to people so that they can see this is actually a problem. And then, as you've said many times before in our conversations, go do their own research and figure out where they want to stand on it, which is
Yeah,
so important.
totally, totally. Let me hit you with a couple of, if you don't mind. I know we're not here to have, this is not an academic conference where we're going to have scientific debate and let's talk about the latest peer-reviewed studies, but this is about the latest peer-reviewed studies. Okay, so two things I just want to call to your attention that really exemplify how bad the misinformation problem is among vets in the US. First one has to do with dietary carbohydrate. So if any of your listeners, either themselves, a loved one, or a pet that's struggle with diabetes, the disease diabetes, then they'll already know this. But I'll give you a quick 101 for anybody that's listening that doesn't understand what diabetes is. Diabetes is this like metabolic condition that you can develop that prevents you from metabolizing carbohydrate well. Process the body uses to break down carbs. When you eat a piece of bread, what happens is during digestion, all those complex carbs in the bread, they get broken down into individual molecules of this stuff called glucose. It's just sugar. And that's what it goes into your bloodstream as. That's what carbs become before they go into your bloodstream, your dog's bloodstream. And there's sugar in the blood at any given point. Even if you don't eat any carbohydrate, there's a certain amount of sugar that has to be in the blood. It's part of what your body uses to do all the things it does. But it can't have too much. If you have too much sugar in the blood, it's toxic and it will put you in a coma and it will kill you. It's a finely controlled system. And your body has evolved this great way to keep it in line. Essentially secretes a hormone. The hormone's called insulin. And insulin, when your blood sugar gets up too high, the insulin comes out and it pushes all that sugar into places like fat cells and muscle tissue and places it can be non-toxically stored. Diabetic people don't produce enough insulin. That's their problem. And so they eat a high carbohydrate meal, or their blood sugar gets too high, and they don't make insulin to make it come back down. Okay. Huge problem, affects millions and millions of people and a growing and tough to pin down number of dogs and cats as well. Large number. There are folks who are listening to this who are nodding along. If you go to the vet and you go, look, so my dog is very thirsty. This is a common symptom of diabetes. But what's wrong with this guy? And they diagnose diabetes. What that vet will do is they will say, look, there's two things. Diabetes can be managed. You gotta manage it. You're gonna have to do some work, pet owner, and you do. There's two pillars of diabetes care for pets, just as with people: diet and insulin therapy. So because your body doesn't make enough insulin, your dog's body doesn't make enough insulin, you can inject it yourself. So if you have diabetes, you're very familiar with this. You're constantly pricking your finger or using some kind of wearable technology to figure out where your blood sugar is so that you can figure out if you need to give yourself insulin. Essentially, if your pet has diabetes, you are doing the same thing. You're going to monitor its blood sugar by pricking its paw, and then you're going to give it the right amount of insulin it needs through shots to bring that back in line. But the other part is diet, because the things that you eat impact your blood sugar. And if you just listen to the last 5 minutes of me talking, what is the way you think you would keep blood sugar levels low? It pretty obviously to me is you just take the carbohydrate out of the diet. That's the one that becomes glucose. Glucose is the thing we're dealing with here. So we're going to try to reduce carbohydrate content as much as possible. Well, not in the veterinary world. In the veterinary world, if your vet diagnoses your dog with diabetes, they will say, we're going to put it on a prescription only diet. That prescription only diet is called Hill's Metabolic, and it's 40% adjustable carbohydrate. That's insanity. Okay.
It is insanity.
Insanity. And where the scientific record comes into this is that this spring, I believe in this so much. It's so obviously the case to me that this spring, results of a peer-reviewed study that we had folks carry out at a major research university about this very topic got published. I run a startup. I have a dog food company, and as you might guess, it's low-carb dog food, keto natural pet foods. We make the lowest carbohydrate kibble. That's the thing I believe in, and so we make a product for people who think the same things I think. But huge part of our customer base are folks whose dogs have diabetes because they recognize all this obvious stuff. They've been on a prescription diet like Hill's Metabolic. They've had a horrible time trying to control their dog's blood sugar. So try something else. They try ours. Lo and behold, oh my God, it's so much better. My dog's blood sugar is so much lower, and they're happy. But we're not a big company. But we spent $150,000, which is like 15-20% of our annual revenue. This is not a small amount, carrying out a study at the University of Guelph. We gave them this money. We said, what I want to test is our diets, which are generally available, you don't need a prescription, against Hill's Metabolic directly. And we're going to look at all the metabolic markers. And so we can say once and for all, who's really doing a better job of this? And it would be really interesting because if it goes the way I think it'll go, that should be pretty punchy for vets, right? Hill's Pet Nutrition, for anyone that isn't familiar with that brand, employs more veterinary nutritionists than any other organization in the history of planet Earth. Okay. They are the brand of their motto and their logo. Everything has science in it. They try to be a very sciencey brand. They make prescription products and they distribute them heavily through vets. They got tons of vets on staff. On the other hand, I'm a guy. I'm a bald idiot talking into a microphone. Okay. So you would think that this company that does $4 billion a year in annual revenue and has been around for 60 years and employs more veterinary nutrition would have no problem creating a better widget than the guy on the couch. Except that's not at all what the results showed. He wiped the floor with the leading prescription only diet for dogs with diabetes and obesity in the United States. Dogs on our diet had 60% lower blood sugar than dogs on Hill's Metabolic. Think about
Wow.
that. That is not a small difference. You're talking about less than half as much sugar in the blood. Not just it's completely better. And it's not because I am an idiot savant or anything like that. It's because a veterinary nutritionist working for Hill's knows that, okay, we made this with very low carbohydrate content. It'd be better for these dogs with diabetes, but it's going to cost us a fortune and we'd have to sell it for $400 and that's not going to work. So we're just going to put this other product out. But anyway, you can go, I'll give you the links. You can put them in the show notes, but those two studies got published this spring and they show this thing that you widely hear when you walk into the vet's office is absolute nonsense. It's just totally wrong. They've been totally misled about it. And unfortunately, hundreds of thousands, if not millions of dogs that suffer from diabetes are paying the cost of it. It's a mess.
Yeah. Remind me what the percentage of carbohydrates in your food is again.
1/8 what it is in Hill's Metabolic. And it's the same price. We had a third diet when we ran the study also. We just made one up that was the same exact macronutrient content as Hill's, but without some of the bells and whistles. I don't even know what they are off the top of my head, but it's got like carnitine and some other like micronutrient type stuff that Hill's is like, this is what really moves the needle on diabetes and blood sugar. And the difference between our garden variety diet that we made up and Hill's Metabolic, there was a difference. It's marginal. The difference between us and Hill's Metabolic was mega, okay? Because the carbohydrate, just make one with less carbs, your dog's blood sugar is going to be lower. It's that simple. Yeah, and yet there are 100,000 plus vets in the U.S. and a huge percentage of them. You go in, ask your vet tomorrow morning, what's the best way to feed a dog with diabetes? And the answer is a prescription-only diet like this one. And they're wrong. It's just that simple.
It's crazy, but I feel like we're finally getting to the point where people are starting to do enough research that they're realizing that it's not the right diet. And again, it's
On that one.
conversations like these, that push the needle.
I agree with you. It's how I was saying before that my tone when I wrote my book was like, I feel for vets. And I can't with a straight face say, look, if I went to school, paid couple $100,000 to get an advanced degree, learned all these things there, read all these seemingly scientific sounding things, and then some guy on the internet is going to come along and tell me I'm wrong. It is really hard to engage with the right level of stuff on that, buck what you've been told. It's risky for your career. You get that wrong and you end up being a pariah. Like, it's a big deal. And so I sympathize with how effective misinformation systems can be in that way. But when it comes to diabetes, it's like, it's just so straightforward, explained in 5 minutes. And anyone who's familiar with that disease knows how it works. I have less sympathy with vets over that because it just seems like professional negligence that you can't know how diabetes works. Like, you can't just know the most basic aspects of it. It starts to make me upset when I get those customer service tickets from my customers saying, my vet thinks, even though I'm having great results, I should switch back to Hill's Metabolic for whatever reason. And it's just like, yeah, that's kind of upsetting. Is it better that this is happening in the internet era where you and I can have an intelligent conversation about this? People listen and maybe their minds get changed for the better. Yes, in a way. On the other hand, it's the Wild West on the internet, and there's going to be people talking about how birds aren't real. The birds aren't real of dog food, whatever that is, just mixed in as much as there is good stuff. And so, because it's not going through the scientific community, that whole companion animal nutritional science community is broken,
Yeah.
big time broken, beyond the scope of this conversation. But it's essentially industry pays for all the work that's done, and so that has huge problems. Functioning scientific community is a good thing for truth and advancing knowledge. There are systems and institutions that help separate the screwball theories from the stuff that has merit, and that those don't exist as much on the internet. And so you do have this problem of like, don't believe everything you read on the internet. And we're competing with there are no birds people. And so it's that too. It would be better if it was just a healthy veterinary nutrition community, but it's not.
I'm going to say something that's going to be really controversial here, especially for
You
this
think birds
niche.
are fake? Is that what you're about to say right now? Okay.
No, but I have a birds
There
are
you go.
fake kind of like purview for you. As long as we have influencers accepting paychecks to promote brands of food without doing actual nutritional research and understanding what they're promoting, the industry is going to continue to have problems because
Sure.
people are still going to say, oh, well, so and so that has 500,000 followers or 30,000 followers or whatever feeds their dog this, it must be fine. But I guarantee that influencer cannot tell you anything about why that food is good, what the percentage of carbohydrates is, if it will work for your dog, does your dog have diabetes, all these things. Think about where you're getting your information is what I'm saying. I am an influencer, okay? I am. But let me tell you guys how much research I do before I bring people like Daniel onto this show, or I feed my dogs Daniel's food or other brands of food, because I dive in deep. I went and got a certification for it. I mean, that should tell you how crazy I am about this stuff. It's super important that you really, really go all the way in and unscrew all of the bolts and peel back all of the layers and look, because while something might be great for my dog, it might not be great for your dog. And you've really got to figure those things out.
And it's tough. I'm sorry. Our new nutritional labels that require that consumers get all the raw information that they should have to make good and well-informed decisions about what they're going to feed their dog. Is that a step in the right direction? You bet. A big step in the right direction. You can't do it without that. Like, give me a break. But building a intellectual framework that allows you to make good judgments about what's good, bad, or indifferent about the nutritional information that you see is a totally separate exercise. And it's a challenge. It's the one that, like we were saying before, is you got to become scientifically, at least a little bit scientifically literate. You have to be able to listen to this show, go, what is this guy talking about? Then just spend 30 seconds finding the paper, not finding somebody that agrees, disagrees, whatever with what I'm saying. Go find the paper. Go take a look at it, see if it says what I just told you it says. And do that same exercise when you're testing claims that you find that influencers make. Trust me, I wish that there was a better method than that. If there was something at this stage that was less legwork, but got you the right results, I'd be telling you what it is, I promise you. The unfortunate truth is, like, me telling you to trust me or Emily telling you to trust her, that is not a scalable, trustworthy process because anybody else can do it too. And anybody can sound persuasive or punchy over a 30-minute conversation. Most people. I can't, with a straight face, say to your listeners, that's good advice. Just find somebody that you trust and listen to them. Got to be able to run it down for yourself. It shouldn't be that way. That's not how a lot of information, like academic disciplines, work. It's not the case with physics. I do not know how cold fusion works. I do not know how a nuclear bomb is made. But I don't doubt the physicists at MIT because the system is a functional one. It's not corrupted by industry trying to shape it to industry's ends. And so it works. It allows us to all make good decisions about whether we want nuclear power or nuclear war or whatever without really understanding how that stuff works at a granular level. It doesn't work like that in companion animal nutrition. That's the key take home is like there is so much bad information in the veterinary community that what you ought to be able to do, go to your vet, ask them, they tell you reliable information that you can act on, you can't do. And until that gets fixed, and that's the work of folks like me and Emily, is trying to correct that situation, which is a generational problem. Until that gets fixed, the answer is, I'm sorry, you got to do it yourself. I'm trying to put as much information as I can out there that helps people. But at the end of the day, if I say, yeah, trust me and you'll be good to go, you don't want to hear that. Don't do that. I do think that. I honestly do. Like, if you listen to me, I think you're going to get things right. I work hard on these things, but I got to teach you how to fish. You can't just give a man a fish.
That's exactly why I started this podcast, was so that here's a starting point. I'm asking the questions. Here's some resources for you to look into this. Now go and do your other research and compare it to what I've given you and see where you end up. Maybe we agree, maybe we don't. Maybe you find something that you can bring back to me and I can learn something. It just really is a lot of back and forth. But transparency is the biggest thing that's a huge issue, mainly my main issue with the pet nutrition industry. And so this label changing, the pet nutrition facts box changing, is going to give people a little bit more of an in-depth look into what's actually in their food. So can you walk everybody a little bit through what are we going to see that we're going to maybe understand a little bit better, maybe going to make us a little bit more uncomfortable, things like that will be on the label that we should be looking for?
Yeah. So like the broad strokes, like kind of fundamental take home, it goes like this. The guaranteed analysis panel came into being because once upon a time we treated companion animals more or less livestock, and that our concerns back then in that era were hucksters selling foods that weren't actually even foods. They wouldn't keep the animal alive. It was Dan's great dog, whatever. And it wasn't even really food. It was cardboardy, whatever. And it didn't have the things the animal needs to stay alive. The guaranteed analysis panel shows some amount of nutritional content on a minimums, maximums types of basis. It allows you to say, okay, this guy's food has got enough protein in it that it's not going to cause my dog to starve to death. But what's happened over time with the humanization of pets is that's not what we're trying to do anymore. We know if you get a commercial pet food from the store, it's got enough in there to keep your dog alive. That's not the issue. We're good with that. What the issue is how to optimize its long-term health, how to reduce its chronic disease risk over time, how to extend its lifespan as much as you can. The way you think about your own nutrition. You don't go, well, geez, if I eat this donut versus if I eat this stalk of broccoli, is it possible that I'm going to starve to death because it's not actually food? No, you're going to pull calories out of both of them and you can make energy out of them. One's less good for your long-term health. And it's like that with dogs and cats. And what the Pet Nutrition Facts panel, which is the new labeling that's taking over for the Guaranteed Analysis panel, does is it gives you the ability to do that kind of stuff. Most notably, it tells you on a grams basis, protein, fat, carbohydrate, just like on the human FDA Nutrition Facts panel. When I go about looking for a pet food product, the thing that the evidence very clearly to my eyes shows that if you want to optimize your dog's long-term health, all else being equal, the thing that moves the needle the most is increase protein as much as you can, meat-based protein, and reduce carbohydrate intake. Once upon a time, you couldn't do that. If you go to the pet store today, because these new rules haven't taken effect yet, you still are going to have problems with that. But under the new ones, you can. A good way to think about, I'll give you a link, Em, that you can put into the show notes that has AFCO's presentation on this. It's hard to talk about what a visual thing is, but I'll put the link in the show notes so people can check it out. But a good way to approximate what it's going to look like is just go buy a, bag of chips or a frozen lasagna or whatever, and go look at the way that the nutritional content is presented there, because it's going to be like that. That's the fundamental difference, is that now we've got carbohydrate, and now we don't have everything exclusively on what's called an as fed percentage basis. One of the challenges right now in pet food labeling, to my eyes, it's less of a problem than not knowing how much carbohydrate is in there, but it's a significant thing, is that different pet food products, different kinds of pet food products, have really different moisture contents. And or a raw or a fresh pet food product has something like 75% moisture. It's just the human body is made up of a lot of water. Animals are made up of a lot of water. And if you're not taking the water out of it and making it shelf stable, any one of those kinds of products is a large chunk of it is moisture. Whereas kibble products are like 10% moisture. They're dried out so that they don't spoil, and there's just much less water in them. So for every calorie of nutrition that's in either one of those types of things, the amount of water that is alongside that calorie varies dramatically. Guaranteed analysis panel requires brands to disclose their nutritional content on what's called an as fed basis. That means if you just take this stuff out of the bag and feed it to a dog, what percentage of it is protein, fat, moisture, or carbohydrate or ash? And so what that means is that a raw or a canned diet where 1/3 of the calories come from protein, the guaranteed analysis protein number on that product is going to be like 10%, because 75% of what comes out of the can and you give to your dog is water. So you're only talking about 25% of it is calories, and 1/3 of that is protein. So 25 divided by 3 is like 8%. Whereas the exact same nutritional profile, if it was a kibble that was only 10% moisture, the number on the bag would be 30 something percent. Exact same nutritional content. And so it's a bananas way to require consumers to try to have to figure things out. Now you're going to be able to do the apples to apples comparison that you really ought to be doing. Otherwise, you can get the wool pulled over your eyes by folks who sell very high moisture products, and it winds up with a comparatively low carbohydrate number or comparatively high protein number in a dry product.
Just in case anyone's wondering, the protein minimum that your dog should have should be 60%. I don't know if there's any kibbles that meet that requirement, that like the bigger brand ones, especially when we're hitting like 40 to 70% in carbohydrates. They're not hitting that 60% minimum. And that's
Not even
no, not
remote.
even. It's like 22% is what's
22
in
is the
most.
minimum. 22 is the minimum in the sense that that's what AFCO and the FDA require. If you're going to sell pet food in the store, call it so-called complete and balanced, it's got to be 22.5% protein for puppies, 18.5 for adult dogs. And they all are essentially, most of them, playing a game where they're trying to get as close to that number, but be just above it as possible. But like you said, that's 1/3 as much protein as a wolf is getting in just walking around being a wolf. 1/3. That's a big difference.
It's a big difference. We wonder about our dog's body conditions and why one dog is thin and fit and looks great versus why maybe a dog is obese and not so active. I can guarantee you that the main difference is how they're fed.
There are plenty of ways to take carbohydrate out of the diet of your dog. Feeding our products is not the only one. You could feed a raw diet. A good raw diet is all meat, so zero carbohydrate. That's a way to do it. You can make stuff yourself. You can go to the butcher and get your meat products and feed your dog that. Or you could pick the next lowest carbohydrate kibble you can find. But that's not a great answer because they're like 25, 30%. If you take the carbohydrate out of your dog's diet for 6 months, and you don't go at the end of that, oh, my dog looks like the pit bull from the fighting ring, basically, in terms of body. Oh, I can see its ribs. I can see its muscle definition. That's what a dog with 10% body fat looks like. And that happens all the time if you take carbohydrate out of its diet. They just center out at what is a healthy body composition, 10 to 15%. There are admittedly a lot of ways to take weight off of a dog. If your dog is fat, and you go to the vet and you say, my dog needs to lose weight, they can tell you a lot of things to do that would work. Take the dog on a lot more exercise, it's going to lose weight. Hold everything else the same, take it for a lot of exercise, it's going to lose weight, no doubt about it. Hold everything else the same, but only feed it half as much food, it's going to lose weight. Same thing. But the only reason there's such a thing as an overweight or obese dog is because of carbohydrate. You can't make a dog fat in the first instance unless you fatten it up with carbohydrate, period. On one level, it's great to have a St. Bernard. On another, it's tough because I can't just bring him in here and put him on the screen. But you can find him in our marketing materials if you poke around. But think of a St. Bernard in your head. He does not look like that. You can see his ribs. You can see the veins on his muscles. And I walk him every day. He gets a mile and a half walk. But these big dogs that are very short muzzled, I live in a hot area. You can't walk him that much. He doesn't get a ton of exercise. He's built like a rock. And it's not because he gets some special fancy, I'm exercising him all the time type thing. Just don't feed them carbohydrate, and the glucose doesn't go into the fat tissue, and the animals can't get fat. It's like the proof is with diabetes, the proof is in the pudding, like in one day, because those folks are measuring their dog's blood sugar on a daily basis. And so if you feed them something and it lowers the blood sugar, they know about it that day. Obesity and body composition, the proof is still in the pudding. It takes a little longer. You don't lose like body fat in a day, but over a 3-month period of time, if your dog is fat, your dog will lose a big chunk of its body fat just taking the carbs out of its diet. It's a problem with so much of the pet food industry these days is built around health related marketing. Kind of everybody that's selling pet food is saying, we make the uniquely healthy stuff for X, Y, and Z, for whatever reasons they say, choose us. There's some value brands, but generally speaking, everybody is saying, we make the healthy stuff, choose us. And you as a consumer have to evaluate all their different little pitches and make a choice for yourself. But the vast majority, one I would recommend as a like sort of divining rod, a good test to figure out whether you should trust some brand and its claim or not, are the health benefits they're talking about measurable? Are they things that I can observe changes in a concrete way over time? Maybe some of these things ring a bell for you. And shinier coat, have you heard that? You ever see a pet food that tells you your dog's going to have a shinier coat or better energy? Those kinds of things, those are designed for a reason. Supports healthy functioning. Those words are chosen really carefully because number one, it's not concrete. There's no way to measure shininess of coat. That's not real. It's very easy to make it in the eye of the beholder. And yeah, number two, it's not measurable, can't be reduced to that kind of thing. And so very few things can go like that. And so one of them, fortunately, is body composition. And so you want to take fat off a dog, super easy, super straightforward.
It's funny because you just mentioned all those terms, but it's my understanding that AFCO had to redefine words like natural, organic, and human grade because of how they were being used in marketing on dog food bags.
Yeah, so they define all sorts of terms, AFCO does, such that if you're going to use that term on your label, it's going to mean something specific, and they're going to be able to tell you whether you're being straight and above board or not. And yeah, they update those definitions over time because people do take advantage of them. They are not perfect right now. To me, it is not natural just because a dog can digest carbohydrate like a human being can digest a donut. It is not natural to feed it something that its ancestors didn't eat for 99.9% of their evolution. And it would make it so that you couldn't call any carbohydrate rich product natural. And obviously plenty do. There's a brand that's called Natural Balance. They only make products that are high in carbohydrate content. Is that a natural balance for a dog? I don't think so. So it depends. I'm a relatively litigious guy, meaning they're getting a lot of lawsuits because I am educated as a lawyer. I have a law background. And unlike a lot of people, I think the court system is a reasonably good way, if used appropriately, for getting good social outcomes. I'm just using it as an example. I don't want to get a nasty gram from Natural Balance for this, but I probably will. The brand Natural Balance, is that a natural balance for a dog? No, not really. Is anybody going to do anything about it and stop them from doing that? Well, apparently not, because they do hundreds of millions of dollars in revenue a year, and they're continuing to use the brand. If somebody came along and filed a lawsuit on behalf of consumers and said, this is deceptive advertising, because this isn't natural in the sense that my dog's ancestors never ate this, nor is it balanced, because any definition of balance would reflect what's actually natural for the animal. That stuff is out there happening all the time, and sometimes it takes people to actually do something about it. And so sometimes AFCO updates its rules because folks are taking advantage of it. But even if you give AFCO all the credit in the world and you say, oh, they're quite well run, they're doing their job really well, there's still always going to be loopholes. You and I were talking about ingredient splitting beginning of this show. That's a loophole. It exists because the reason it's a pervasive practice is it's kind of this effective, sneaky way to mislead people. And it kind of falls between the cracks of AFCO's rules. And now everybody that sells pet food that's trying to mislead people about how much meat is in their product does it. And you're playing whack-a-mole if you're a regulator. Like there's industry's always trying to get taken advantage. And so, yeah, it's tough.
I heard this a lot before I got my certification, which was the first three ingredients that you should see on your pet food when you're looking to buy is meat, bone, and organ meat. And while that is true, those are the three ingredients that you should look for. There are things when it comes to that that you need to be very careful of, like chicken meal, beef meal, things like that. Those are byproducts. We want actual organ meat, actual bone, actual meat. And so you have to know exactly what you're supposed to be looking for, not just think, well, chicken meal, that's meat. It's not. You have to understand what the difference of those three things is because brands are starting to catch on to that. And now they're moving those ingredients that might look like what you want it to be up to the front of the list.
That's the bigger problem. Is that it's not that but the rule you just articulated is a reasonable rule. In a world in which the brand doesn't have to tell the consumer how much carbohydrate is in there, it's a pretty good way to think trying to get to a product that's mostly meat, the stuff that dogs should be eating, and less of the agricultural stuff that they should. But it's been around for long enough because carbohydrate disclosure has not been a thing. Rules of thumb like that have become the best way to go about making a good decision. Well, if it's a raw diet, probably going to be low in carbohydrate content because it's got all the moisture in it. It doesn't have to be shelf stable in the same way. That's kind of why carbs get used at all in kibble world. Is it like helps it stay together and stays shelf stable. So like there was a time, I think most people have learned to see through this, but where grain free became very popular because once upon a time, it was a reasonably good rule of thumb for trying to approximate, is this diet higher in meat or lower in meat? And the same thing is true for general rules of thumb based on the ingredient list. Are the first 5 ingredients all meats or are the first 3 this, that, and the other thing? Not bad. But there's such popular pieces of advice now, and the regulatory system is not airtight. And so brands have reacted to that. They have learned how to be misleading in light of that. And so what you have is brands taking the overall meat content, slicing that into 100 different individual ingredients and stuffing them all at the beginning of the ingredient list so that you look at your bag of 40% carbohydrates on thing and you read through the first 2 lines of ingredients across the whole bag and they're all meat and you're like, good, I'm good to go. And there's no carbohydrate number on there. So yeah, you'd be forgiven for thinking that's mostly a meat product. But what they've done is they've split the carbohydrate ingredients into lower quantities on an individual basis than any of those meat ingredients, but just kind of hidden them behind there. And if you have 30 different kinds of carbohydrate, red lentils, green peas, and black-eyed peas, and all the things, you can hide that behind 10 meat ingredients first and still be selling a 40% carbohydrate product. Well, that's an example of that generalized strategy. Is like the brands know how people are thinking about the ingredient list and trying to approximate what that means about the healthfulness of the product. And so they know that well enough to take advantage of it. That stuff's been around long enough that they're taking advantage of it. And so it stops being a good rule, basically. It stops being a good rule of thumb because it's no longer reliable.
Things are changing here, which is going to help. But from what I understand, this is a 6-year implementation.
Yeah.
And so it's going to take time.
Yeah, the rules got adopted in end of the year 2023 session, AFCO's 23 session. They got published for the first time in AFCO's 2024 model rules. When they got published, AFCO also published what it calls a recommendation for a 6-year enforcement discretion period. Meaning that if this is the rule, you got to just use this new facts panel now. But if you don't use it, nobody's going to enforce it against you as yet. Nobody's going to say that's what's wrong. I'm going to penalize you for this. You pull your bags off the shelf, anything like that. And they said, we're going to give them 6 years to get compliant. Let me tell you, as the CEO of a pet food company, the logic behind that, the facial logic, the given logic for that is, well, you have to give these brands, they're going to have to label it differently. And in order to do that, they're going to have to test stuff probably. And then after they run the test, they're going to have to update their labels to make sure that the labels have the new chart on them. That is not a 6-year exercise. That is a 1/4 exercise, period. Every brand that's selling pet food knows exactly how much carbohydrate is in their food already. That's a fact. In order to change your bag so that the new numbers are on the new chart, it's not 6 years. Nobody is building their product line with a 6 year kind of like timeline in mind. The new trends come up a lot and people embrace the new trends and all that kind of stuff. It doesn't go on 6 years. It seems to me that the 6 year enforcement discretion period is kind of one last kick in the wherever you don't want to be kicked by AVCO, like one last really big drag in your feet. This isn't going to have teeth until 2030. It's a long time. And so brands now, brands like mine, are getting compliant as quickly as possible. I want to be the first compliant brand in the US. Then, at least on some level, consumers can start to expect that. If you're not listening to the show, you probably didn't know this is happening. Okay. And so you're not going to know what you're missing until you see what you're missing. And by embracing the new stuff as quickly as possible, I'm helping to start creating some pressure. But I'm a tiny brand, and the vast majority of the industry wants to wait to the absolute last second on this one. And so it's just going to be slow. I would be, I think, blowing smoke up somebody's rear end if I said, you as a consumer can help by exerting pressure. Realistically, I don't think that's going to be how it's going to work. You can ask your pet food brand why they haven't adopted the new labeling yet, and then judge their answer and see if it feels like it holds water to you and use that to shape how you think about that brand going forward. I'd encourage you to do that. Prove me wrong, pet owners of America. I just think the likelihood that enough people rally and start demanding this of individual brands is going to move the needle. But I'd love to be wrong.
We would all love to be wrong in this area. Just to see some change would be so important. And this isn't just, it's not just pet food, right? It's treats and supplements that are getting this makeover as well.
I think that's right. That's an excellent question, though. I don't know the answer to that 100%. Treats and supplements, hide the carbohydrate thing isn't nearly as big of an issue there for a couple of reasons. One, treats don't make up a very large percentage of your dog's diet. What percentage of the calories each day come from treats? Percent?
It's like
I don't know.
5 or 10%. It's
5
not
to
very
10%.
much.
So you switch from so if 30% of that is carbohydrate right now, and you switch to 0, what's 30% of 10? That's 3% of the diet. It's kind of small potatoes in that regard. And that's somebody that feeds probably a lot of treats. I don't really feed treats to my dog, even though we make treats. Second, though, is unlike kibble, there are lots of different kinds of ways of making dog treats that don't require carbohydrate to hold it together. We sell freeze-dried single ingredient chicken liver treats. There's 0 carbohydrate. And our kibble is legitimately novel, and we're the only ones doing it, not treats. There are lots of brands where you can go right now, find a freeze-dried 0 carbohydrate treat. It's not too hard to find. Better than not having that disclosure on there. But it's also, the revolution is that these kibble brands that have been going out there telling folks for decades, feed your dog just like a wolf, by feeding our wolf kibble, are going to have to look people in the eye and be like, well, yeah, it's 65% carbohydrate. And
Yeah.
people are going to be pissed.
What do you think the biggest challenge about changing your label has been so far?
Nothing. What are some things that could be challenging about that? If you call up, I don't know, Blue Buffalo, and you say, why haven't you guys changed your label yet? And they go, well, it's going to take us 6 years. What do I think their reasons would be? I have no idea. You don't have to disclose the carbohydrate content on your label. So when I say brands all know, maybe some are just legitimately like, no, I don't really know. I never thought about that. I just look at what I have to for AFCO. I just think that's ridiculous. And so I think they all know. We certainly do. Every batch we produce gets nutritional analytics. One thing that we try to sell to people, a quality that's very important to our customers, is the nutritional content, the protein percentage, the carbohydrate percentage, all that kind of stuff. And so we keep an eye on that stuff. Maybe we do more than the average bear. No, don't get it twisted. This is not rocket science for these brands. There's no major challenge.
And that's exactly what I wanted to hear because, like you said, 6 years is a long time. And there shouldn't be any reason, one, that it's taking 6 years. And two, it's not that difficult, to be honest. It really isn't that difficult, to be honest. And if we have to hem and haw around it so that we can continue to sell bags of food without people starting to wonder if it's okay to be feeding our food, then there are bigger problems at play.
Yeah. I don't know, man. I have like everybody, I got like a grandiosity and a sense of self-importance, I guess. There's not too many brands that can authentically embrace an honesty policy in pet food. They are doing things that either they don't have a professional level understanding of the nutritional science side of it, or they know it's not good. They know that what they're selling is problematic and could be a lot better if they changed it in a big fundamental way. And that's not some of the brands. That's like 90% plus of the brands, ones that you're listening to the show and you like. They can't just lean into being above board, honest. We'll tell you what's wrong with our stuff. We'll tell you what's good about it. You can't do that because they are selling something that's like materially bad for dogs. And so it's rare that you can find that, I would say. So yeah, judge people hard. Be skeptical when your brand is talking to you. I don't know. Do you get a lot of pet food executives on your show?
So, y yes and no. I have people that do wanna come on the show and brands that wanna come on the show, and a lot of them I turn down, especially spending the last couple of months traveling around, going to things like Global Pet Expo and Super Zoo, where I have met that want to bring on, certain brands onto the podcast that I have turned down because I don't agree with their food. I don't want to promote their food, but I also have lots of other brands that will be coming on. And I have done some pretty deep investigation. Read the books, read the ingredients, test it out on my dogs, see if it works or not. And if my dogs have a bad reaction to it, you can guarantee that they're not going to come on the show. I'm very, very picky when it comes to that stuff. Dog food is a huge part of the pet industry for obvious reasons. And I want to be very diligent and very careful about what I'm promoting because I don't want somebody's dog to suffer because of a recommendation that I made. I mean, I did
Yeah.
that for long enough as a vet tech.
And it's
So,
hard to do on one level. My reaction to that is like, have them on anyway. If you don't like their product, it's a better reason to have them on because you can skewer, you can ask them the hard questions. You're subject to your interview now, and they gotta, but that's unpleasant and it might not be the tone you're going for. And
well, and if they want to pull the episode after that, that's just wasted
exactly.
time.
The point I was trying to make is I'm never going to tell you to pull an episode. You just run with this. You ask me whatever you want. I will tell you what's good, bad, and indifferent about our stuff. The reason you don't get is if you tried to do that with so many brands, even if you don't love them, bring them on the show, but do that. And yeah, you're not going to get satisfying answers.
There was somebody when I was at Super Zoo and we were talking about diet and things like that. And she said, how many brands have you ever asked, what are those natural spices or natural ingredients? And she said, how many have you done that with? And so for the rest of the day, when I was visiting food booths, I asked them, well, what are the ingredients in this? And let me tell you, there were about 3 people that were able to tell me what those were. And the other people were just like, I don't know.
Hmm.
And I was like, okay, well, there's something to this then. So that's another rabbit hole that I'm going to be going down because you should know what those natural ingredients are. Are they actually natural? Are they natural spices, flavoring, whatever? Did we put them in to enhance the flavor or are they actually natural flavors that are just in there for whatever reason? So yeah, I thought it was very interesting that I was unable to get a lot of clear answers on that. Just one item on the food bag.
Yeah, two separate problems. There's the lack of knowledge, which is for sure a thing. Things you should be able to get answers to in modern American consumer culture. You can't. It shouldn't be that way. You should know. You should be able to know. And then there's the lack of education among the folks that are telling you about it and that are just like, can't understand the context, gonna mislead, all that kind of nonsense.
It's
Yeah,
wild. It's a wild industry, that's for sure. I appreciate you coming on again and going over this information with us. I think it's really important that we are educating and telling people what's next, what to be looking for. And now they know they can read your book, they can reach out to you, they can understand a little bit more about this. We'll have those peer review studies in the episode description. What would you like to leave our listeners with today?
the only thing beyond that that I think is worth noting is if you've made it this far in the episode and you're like, this guy knows what he's doing, he's highlighting real problems and he's actually doing things to try to fix them. One thing you can do is you can become a shareholder in the company. We have a dog food company that makes low carb dog food because I believe all the things I've talked about on this show, that it's carbohydrate is the devil for dogs and cats. And we're the only one doing it, which means that AFCO's new regulations, we're going to be the first brand in the country to do it. And when this change happens on an industry-wide basis, one of our biggest challenges as a business is most of our potential customers don't know how much carbohydrate is in their existing food. They think already that they're feeding a product like ours. And so when these new regulations come into effect, it's going to blow a lot of people's minds. So if you think that is the recipe for our company taking off, you might want to consider buying some shares and investing in our company. I've been on the show to talk about the big lawsuit that we filed over the DCM controversy. I've created a nonprofit. We do a lot of things that are just all trying to solve this generational problem. This veterinary community is really gotten us into a pickle here. How do we fix that? How do we get it back to a place where they have solid, trustworthy knowledge base that we can return to a world where we're like, have a question, ask your vet, get a good answer, move forward. If you believe in that, if you believe we're doing that kind of stuff, you can buy some shares. I'll give Em the link. It's really easy to do. It's not like I'm only speaking right now to, professional investors and like wealthy people. You can buy $250 worth of shares, and it's like just as easy as buying shares of Tesla. They're not publicly traded on the New York Stock Exchange, but it's an internet-based platform where it's just like click, click, click. Okay, buy 1,000 shares, buy 250 shares, and it's helpful for us. A lot of our customers have bought in, invested already, and it gives me this sense of, yeah, I'm representing these people now. They own a piece of the company. I am accountable to them. I gotta stay on mission, or they can kick me out. Effectively, they can take over and run things differently than if I'm falling off track. So I really like it as a accountability measure. And if you think we're doing good things, or you think, oh, this is the future of pet food, like I do, then pop over, take some of your savings and put it into us instead of into some company that you hate.
It's good advice. And to back a company that feels so strongly about pet health, you can't go wrong. So we'll make sure that you have the link. We'll make sure that you have the discount code so that you can get your own bag of food and try it out. And remember, these new labels are going to help us make so many smarter choices for our dogs. Be kind, spread joy, and invest in brands of dog food that have your dog's health interest first. Thank you for listening to The Dog Who Asked for More and for investing in your dog's well-being today. If you've ever stood in the pet food aisle feeling totally overwhelmed, you are not alone. With so many options, it's easy to feel like you'll never know what's actually right for your dog. That's why I created a free nutrition resource to help you cut through the noise and make more confident choices in your pup's health. You'll find the link in the show notes. New episodes drop every Monday and Wednesday. I'll see you next time.